I'm going to start talking, but we're not starting the panel just yet. So sit on tight. We're going to let a couple more people roll in. But while we wait, I do want to introduce what HackDavis is for a second. So for those of you who don't know what HackDavis is, we are the annual collegiate hackathon here at UC Davis. We pride ourselves in being the biggest hackathon in Northern California with an emphasis on hacking for social good. And this year, with COVID and all the very fun stuff happening in the world right now, things will look a little bit different. HackDavis will be fully virtual, 36 hours and jam-packed with a lot of fun workshops and activities all online. So if you haven't already applied, you can apply at hackdavis.io. Yes. Hi, Alicia. Welcome. The main event has arrived. No, all of our panelists are equally wonderful, and we're very excited to have them here. So enough of me rambling. We have all of our panelists here, so I'm going to allow them each to introduce themselves. So some questions that I want them to answer is, their name, what year they graduated or are graduating, what they majored in or what they're majoring in, where did they work or where are they working, and if possible, in what product area, and what their favorite thing about the field that they're in is. I know that was a lot. It's okay if you miss something. I'll probably bug you about it. Just do what you can. And I will call on Shivani first.
Cool. Thanks for introducing us. My name is Shivani. I'm a fourth year computer science major, and I'll be graduating at the end of this quarter. And I interned the last 2 summers at Amazon, and I'll be returning as a full-time developer this January.
Hey, that's exciting. Congratulations on getting your drama offer. All right, next up, I'll let Evelyn go.
Hi, everyone. My name is Evelyn, and I'm also actually graduating this December, so very excited about that. I was an intern at Reddit this past summer, and I'll be returning as a full-time software engineer this February.
I'm so excited for you. A lot of early graduators. You're leaving all of us here to rot. Next up, I'm going to call on Milat.
Well, I think I don't fit that early graduate boat. I'm actually a transfer to Davis, so I'm a third year. This was my first quarter here, interestingly enough. But yeah, I'm a ManuCon major, CS tech management minor, and I'll be interning at Microsoft in the coming summer as a PM in cloud and AI. Cool.
Very exciting. We have some diversity here. It's not just software engineering. We've got some PMs in the house. So very exciting to have you here with us tonight, Milat. Okay, and finally, we got Alicia.
Hello. Yeah, I had Zoom technical difficulties, but they've been resolved, hopefully. So I graduated Davis last spring, and I'm currently working at Google as a software engineer for the last 4 months or so. I interned at Facebook previously and then twice at Microsoft. I think that was everything.
Nice. You have so much. You have so many. You could have given me one. Yes. Thank you so much for joining us. We have some awesome panelists here tonight. So if you are here attending and you have any questions about what it's like being in the tech industry, about being an intern, about being, employed, or about, the transition from becoming a student and going towards the working world, feel free to put them in the chat. But without further ado, I do have some prepared questions, some questions I thought would be quite popular. So I'll start with a very popular one right now. How do I get my foot in the door? How did you get, the internships and the jobs on top of all the other academic work you've been working on when you were a student? I'm gonna feel free to raise your hand if you have an answer right off the bat. Otherwise, I may just call on you like a TA. Am I gonna be a TA today? Okay. Evelyn, go.
Okay, so just like in general, how to get an intern, like your first internship, or okay. So I mean, if when I started out, like I was a CS major, but I didn't really know this before I started job searching, is that like if you aren't familiar already, you really need to brush up on your data structures and algorithms to be able to do your interviews. And then I would say like get somebody to brush up on your resume, review your resume. Like I obsessed over my resume. I remember like getting it reviewed by like 3 different people before I started sending them out. And like honestly, like even if you don't have any experience, like your class projects, they're also like part of your experience. So definitely like highlight those things and apply to as many places as you can. Like I think that, you know, people who have gone through this process probably know how like hard it is to like get your foot in the door and then get that first interview. So I would really suggest like apply to as many as you can, make network connections by going to like events, or if you have like friends or mutual friends, I would really suggest like getting to know them and then ask them how, you know, how they can, whether they can give you a referral or not, for example. Yeah, I think those are some of the things that I would suggest to be like the first steps that you do if you want to get your first internship.
Awesome, thank you. That was a really tough, just out there question. So I appreciate you being the first person to answer. If anyone else, any of our lovely panelists have any other feedback on, you know, like tips and tricks that really help them get their foot in the door, that got them referrals, that got them, you know, to that first interview, please speak up.
Okay, did I go? Yes, okay.
Yes.
First of all, I don't know how to raise my hand, so that's gonna be an issue this whole time. But yeah, for getting the first internship, I think networking is one of the most important things. I know I've met most of the panelists through networking, either through a club or I guess, okay, 2 clubs, either Computer Science Club or HackDavis. So I would really suggest networking as much as possible. That gets you the referrals. And I really think referrals are the key to getting an internship or a full-time, at least interview. Besides that, I like the way I got my first interview was by going to a conference. So conferences can be super helpful. They're not just getting a piece of paper with your name on it, they're actually seeing you and they're able to talk to you and learn more about you than you can ever learn from a piece of paper. So anything in person is also very helpful, career fairs, things like that. I think that's all I can think of right now.
Perfect, thank you. Ooh, Shivani, let's go.
Sure. I'll add to what our other panelists have already said. I'd agree with most of what they've said, of course. Networking is great. Even if it's not to get directly referral, just knowing people in different companies, you might learn of a job description or a job that you might not even know existed. And networking never really ever hurts. Even you'll come across people in the same class you're taking when you're in upper divs and stuff. So CS Club and HackDavis are 2 great ways to do that. I would also say I started applying when I was like earlier in my college education. And so I looked at a lot of first and second year programs. And I'm really happy I did because the interview process is a little bit less rigorous because they know you have less education in your belt. So I would definitely look into those, especially if you are applying as like a freshman or a sophomore. And most of the big companies do have that. And it's a good way to like get your first internship, especially if you have very little experience. I'd also say just get engaged as much as you can, especially outside of the classroom, because everyone will have the coursework at the end of their degree. But if you can go to hackathons, join a club, network, or do like volunteering in your field or something, it'll give a little spice to your resume. And also like, it'll be good if you get behavioral questions, you'll have something to talk about that isn't necessarily coursework.
Yeah, for sure. I was not adequately prepared for those behavioral questions. I thought all I needed to know was data structures, but turns out you need a personality too. So very good advice. Thank you so much, Shivani. Milap, I see you. You're
Yes.
next.
Yes, I'll conclude this one. You'll find me answering in threes. I don't know why, but PMs do a lot of stuff with threes. So I'd say like one would be networking, like everyone said, all the other panelists. I would add that don't network specifically with referral. I made that mistake at the beginning where I was like, I had this ideal sheet of like one person per company. Like, hey, like in the ideal world, I'm gonna get a referral. But I would say definitely that's a good, like nice to have. But just network to network. I think I learned a ton just with doing networking chats, and then I got like 2-3 mentors out of it. So I would for sure say network. Secondly, I would say don't be too scared to start scrappy. I know like it's hard to definitely start with like nice like large companies on your resume, but I'd say like everyone was saying, class projects, whatever you do on your side, hackathons, stuff like that will also go a long way. And yeah, thirdly, I think we touched on this, but like it's all a numbers game. It's like there's not really any way around it. Surprisingly enough, like everywhere that I got referred, I didn't hear back from, and everywhere I didn't refer, everywhere I didn't get referred, I heard back from. So it's not what you'd expect, but I would just say, yeah, definitely apply to wherever you can, everywhere, and just be cautious of that. But yeah, I definitely agree with everyone else said.
Awesome. I'm going to keep a tally of how many threes we get this panel, but awesome feedback. Thank you so much. Okay, we're off to a good start. I have another question for all of you, and then I also have some user submitted questions that I'm really excited to ask. But the next one I have for you is, well, given that we have a good mix of SWE and PM, software engineers and program managers, I would love to ask how you would describe your role and how you decided that this was the role for you. Feel free to, Alicia, you haven't unmuted, so I'm gonna make you start.
Oh, okay, my microphone button's on my laptop. It's much easier than having to unmute, so just saying. Anyway, yeah, I can start. Loki forgot the question, but it's fine.
So you are a software engineer. I was curious how you would describe, what software engineering
and then
is
why
to
I
you.
chose it, right?
Yes.
Okay. So my role is basically working with technology and just coding pretty much the whole day. If you don't like the coding projects you're working on, you probably should not be a software engineer. You also need to be able to be flexible. So it's more than just being given a project and knowing how to code it. It's being able to work across languages, pick up new technologies super fast, and just be comfortable with not knowing what's going on most of the time. In terms of why I chose it, I guess I've been doing computer science since 9th grade. So for me, it was kind of just a natural path. Anyway, yeah. So I've always liked to code, and I hope to just continue growing in coding. And I actually find it much more interesting working because you do touch on everything you learned in school, but you're using it in a real world scenario, which is much more interesting in my opinion.
9th grade, huh? Oh, Shivani, yes.
Yeah, so to build up on what Alicia said, I think she gave a pretty good description of what a software engineer is. It's learning how to solve problems with technology, mainly through coding and different computer frameworks. And so I won't describe it more than that, but I would say probably the reason why I chose that is kind of like Alicia. I really enjoy coding. It's probably for all the CS classes I've taken, the software programs or projects is my favorite part of the class. And I do enjoy like trying to solve a problem and working through the code. And I find it really satisfying when it works at the end. So yeah, that kind of naturally leads into the software developer engineer role.
Milap, I'm going to pick on you because you are unlike the rest of us, huh?
I'll chime in. Yeah, so I would say I guess Microsoft calls their product managers program managers. It's a very small thing, but you'll find a lot of product people will get, if you look on LinkedIn everywhere, they'll see a mix of names. But yeah, as a product person or a product manager in specific, I'll come back with three. So I guess I was always cross-functionally interested. Like I guess I started my high school even like as event planning, and I found myself going to like different departments and stuff. So I felt like working with a bunch of different people was really fun for me. And then if you pair that well with my creativity, you could say, I was like interested in design or marketing, something like that. And then I found that a combination of both would pretty quickly lead to product. So that's, I guess, kind of why I got into product. And then, of course, this idea of engineers kind of decide how to build things, but product managers decide why they should be built in the first place. So I felt like that was a pretty cool combination of I want to build things, but I should also get a say in what's being built. So that's why I think that's mainly what I guess led me to product. So yeah.
Awesome, thank you. And Evelyn, I want to give you a chance. You've been at a variety of different companies. I'd love to hear, what you enjoy about software engineering.
Yeah, for sure. So just to touch on like what it is, like on top of what Shivani and Alicia have said, I think you also, in certain roles, you also get to design like systems. And I think that is a very fun and like, if you've never done it, like, I think I suggest you like look up like what system design is. It's actually very interesting. Like you get to learn different technologies and put them together to build a system. And that honestly like solidified like my decision to stay being a software engineer, because up until like last year, I was still sort of like deciding what I wanted to do in tech, if I wanted to stay coding or do other things in tech. But I really enjoyed that aspect of tech. And also like, I just like how it allows me to build things that can impact a lot of people that are used by like across like millions of users. And so that's why I decided to stay in tech and as a software engineer.
Oh, I love that. I mean, no wonder you were part of HackDavis, a hackathon for social good, because there's a lot of impact with what you do. So thank you for sharing. Alicia, it looks like you're really bridging the gap between your room and the outside world, huh?
I just traveled during COVID.
Nice. Did you quarantine for 2 weeks beforehand, before leaving?
Of course.
Okay, good. All right, our next question comes from a lovely audience member. They asked, would you be able to describe your experience at the specific companies that you've worked at, particularly, the workload, how many hours you worked, and the expectations that were put on you? Feel free to think about that.
I can start off. So I've worked for 2 summers on the same team at Amazon, and I have actually really enjoyed my team. I really like it. I'm returning to the same team when I go full-time in January. And the workload, I think it's about what I expected. It's like an average day, and everyone who's there, I feel, is pretty passionate about what they do. So they don't really have to be told to like work hard. They will naturally just want to do it and put in the time they need to solve their problem. So, there will be some times when I'll log back onto my computer at night because I had an idea on how to solve something, but it's not like my manager has made me like sit there when I was not wanting to be there. I don't know if that clearly explains it. I think the stuff I've worked on is really interesting, and I've gotten a lot of opportunities to grow and learn different frameworks and languages. Did I cover most of the parts of the question? I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, you covered it very well.
Yeah. So
Since I have you on. Oh, sorry.
No, that's it. I'm happy. Yeah.
While I have you on, I do have another add-on to the question. How would you describe the overall vibe of the company?
The vibe. Yeah. So I would say everyone is pretty like, I would say, I don't know if I'd say fast paced, but it's like everyone's working towards a goal and you keep updated. If you have a problem or something's blocking you, you talk to that person so you can get going and move forward. So I would say there's very little standstill. but the vibe is pretty nice. Most of my team was in their like upper 20s, lower 30s. So I'd say it's pretty young, relatively young. And everyone's very techy and into what they like what they do. I'd say that. So passionate.
Good to know. Unfortunately, if you want a sugar daddy in a company like that, I don't think young is what you're going for. But thank you for sharing, Shivani.
Sure.
Who's next? Who wants to talk about their experience, the work culture that they experience?
I could go next if no one else wants to right now. I feel like the culture at Reddit was like unlike what I've experienced at other companies. I feel like they really encourage like openness and no one is scared to voice their opinions. And even if they were, like, a lot of employees were actively like encouraging them, and through like various channels such as like anonymous like channels. So like an employee would like basically speak on their behalf if they're not like comfortable voicing certain opinions. And also everyone's just like very open with like the tech. The tech culture is just like very open. Like I remember one time something went down and I just saw the infrastructure team like on Slack just openly were trying to figure it out. Like everyone was like, oh my gosh, like what's happening? But it was just so cool to see everyone like coming together, solving that like openly. And we get to see that. And because the company isn't that big, it was only like 700 employees. I'm sure there's like more interns at other companies than the total employees at Reddit. And so it was like, it's such a great like atmosphere and experience. I feel like it's like sort of like that sweet spot where it's not like too small, but it's also like not too big if that's something that you prefer. But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed it. Like there was pretty good work-life balance. Again, it like probably depends on people. Like if some people want to work late at night, that's what they do, but no one is really like forcing them to do that late at night or like work late at night. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. I'm going to pick on Milap because he is our diversity here in terms of program management. So please describe what work culture is like as a program manager.
Yeah, I will for sure, I guess, pre-surface this question with like, for me, culture is a pretty huge thing. Only because you can imagine as a PM, you're interacting with like literally everyone at the company, everyone from like legal all the way to engineers. So I would say it's definitely very cross-functionally heavy. And I could say, I haven't necessarily started at Microsoft yet, but I could say based on my conversations that I've had with the folks that already work there, culture is for sure solid. Obviously, as a PM, another thing you look for is impact that you can bring, and Microsoft couldn't be a better place. Literally every product change will bring change to like a million users. So that's also another plus from that end. And yeah, I think definitely for those main two things, the last one I guess I would hit is cross-functionality. Like, I guess how open are people? And based on my experience or based on my talks, everyone is fairly open there. And it's very, you could say like, people aren't really, I don't want to say formal is the right word, but it's a fairly lax like environment. So that's kind of the third one I wanted to hit. But yeah, I think in general, that's kind of what a PM looks for, I'd say. But yeah, I couldn't speak too much on what it actually is, like work-life balance and stuff yet. But hopefully we have this next year and then maybe I can give you some more insight.
For sure. We'll have you back on when you are a full-fledged PM. Exciting. Alicia, I'm going to give you a turn.
Okay, I'll start with Microsoft. So their culture is, in my opinion, at least on my teams that I was on, is more relaxed than some of the other software engineering companies, which can be very helpful because, as a new engineer, you want that kind of slower pace at the beginning so that you can actually pick up on everything. And then Facebook was at the complete opposite. Again, on my team, I was under Oculus. So that was relatively fast-paced, and they had very high expectations for us. So did Microsoft, but you had more time to pick things up there versus Facebook, where they expect you to learn a lot in very little time. And Google seems to be somewhere in between them. And for me, that's the best pace. It's fast enough that I never feel bored, but slow enough that I'm not overly stressed all the time. So I think I got a question of the number of hours about that I work a week or a day, I guess. I do work just pretty much 8 hours a day, much nicer than school where you have to study once you're done with school. I literally go and watch British Baking Championship every night. So that's awesome. And a very set weekend schedule of doing nothing. So I think it depends on what you like, but that's kind of the range of what I've seen at those 3 companies.
I like it. It's all about balance. It's all about balance. All right. Now, Mazen, I apologize if I butchered your name, but Mazen asked the best way to get internships. I'm going to add onto it to make it a little spicier. If you could pinpoint one technical and one non-technical skill to really hone in on if you're looking for internships or jobs, what would you recommend to some of our lovely audience members today? A little spicy, right? I mean, it's pretty spicy.
Okay, I can start.
Like, no. Okay, go for it.
Okay, I have more than one technical, as in, it's kind of like a list of topics that I tell people to study or to focus on. They are dynamic programming, greedy algorithms, graphs, and trees, so DFS, BFS. And if you got those 4 down, you should be relatively okay for full-time, and then that should be more than enough for junior level internships. And then, what was the other part of the question? Oh, non-technical. Got it. Okay. Yeah. So for non-technical, I like to write down a list of stories ahead of time that I can apply to multiple situations. So for instance, like your biggest strength, biggest weakness, et cetera, just like have some stories that you can apply to most behavioral situations. And that way on the day of, you kind of have these like 4 or 5 stories in your head and you just match them to the question that's being asked. So it makes things quite a bit easier. And then another one bonus is just make sure to have questions prepared for the interviewers. You don't want to be sitting there at the end and not have any questions for them. I've had that. And since then, I've prepared like 10 questions for every interview, just in case, especially behavioral, because you are going to be asked if you have questions, and you have to have questions. That's it.
Do you have any questions for me, Alicia? Because I just asked you a question. So
yeah, let me see your background. That was a question. What's your background?
It's HackDavis.
Wow.
Again, a quick advertising break. Please apply if you haven't already applied. Okay, who's next? Who has some good technical and or non-technical skills that they would really recommend people honing in on and getting some practice in before they get ready for interviews and their jobs?
Okay, I guess I'll go. So my answer will naturally be more non-technical than technical, but I will, I guess, add that like if you're applying for companies like Google or Salesforce, I think those are the main, and Lyft, I think they will have a technical round, I believe. So just like the basic, probably like I think easy. The hardest you'll get is medium on lead code, but those are pretty rare. Yeah, so hence why I did not. So yeah, so the technical ones are here and there. You have to do a little research. In terms of non-technical, I for sure agree with what Alicia said. Definitely have like a set of stories or set of experiences that you can go back on. I would also add, I guess, something along the lines of definitely research their mission and vision, and then try to portray, I guess, like try to add that like kind of that spice to every answer, and kind of like you could say for Microsoft, it's empower others. So I like try to include that some sort of idea with every behavioral question or product question you get. And then I would end with, I guess, for product questions are like, it's very weird. There's like 5 or 6 different types of questions you get asked. So I'd say outside of general research for the company, also you just need to know numbers like the population of the United States or how many people are in like X amount of places. It's like very kind of interesting. It's like very niche information, but that would be the last piece of information I'd suggest for PM people.
Awesome. Thank you. If you haven't already been able to tell, I'm like writing notes for myself in the chat. Disregard those. I'm writing them like I'm writing news articles, like these are headlines, but feel free to correct them if you feel like I didn't represent what you said as accurately as I could have. But awesome. Anyone else? Because we have a lot of questions now that I've begged the audience for them. Yes, Shivani, what's up?
I can say, to build on like the idea of having stories to tell for behavioral questions, what I like to do before every interview is I just like read over my resume just once more, because anything on there is fair game. And they might ask you to expand on something. And I like to remember what I did point out to that I consider skills or things that are important. So whatever made it to your resume, be ready to talk about it, expand on it, think about how it shaped you and why you think it's important enough to get on that one piece of paper that summarizes you. And normally those will help remind you of anything that might come up if they ask you like a problem you've solved or something that you're impressed with or something like that. As for technical, I mean, algorithms and data structures are the two bigger classes. What I do before my interviews is kind of just, I would go through all the slides from my data structures class and just kind of brush up on those. Leak code's good too. I mean, probably what you would expect. You've probably heard this before, but yeah, data structures, algorithms are good for technical. Oh, and
I like this feedback. Oh,
awesome.
Sorry,
just came back to my head. For technical interviews, think out loud. That's the biggest thing I will say. Learn how to think out loud, because a lot of times if you're going on the right track, the interviewer will help you or steer you back in if you start going away. And the way you think can also say a lot about you. So work through it with them and out loud, and also ask clarifying questions if the question they pose is vague. Sometimes they will purposefully make it vague to see if you're considering like edge cases or stuff.
I like it. That is a very crucial piece of advice. I really appreciate that. Okay, we have some more questions, but Evelyn, I do want to give you a chance to answer this if you would like.
Yeah, I think everyone gave really excellent answers. I would have said all of those. And I guess like I just wanted to emphasize Shivani's point on like thinking out loud. I think that is super important. Something it's very hard to do, but you just gotta like train yourself to do it, like practice thinking out loud. I think the best kinds of interviews are interviews that are two-way street. Again, but of course this depends on your interviewer, but I've had interviews where like, it's like I'm discussing a problem with the interviewer if we would, like discuss like a problem in the job. But yeah, I would really recommend like practicing thinking out loud. If you can practice with other people, that's even better. So yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That was a really good question. That's a spice. But next up, we have a very, very good question. It was privately messaged, but I'm not sure if any of you have had experiences, working abroad. I actually think Ben, one of our HackDavis directors, might have some input on it. He's not a panelist, but for the panelists that are here, if you did have experience abroad, feel free to share. Otherwise, I'm going to make Ben answer this. Okay, hi, Ben.
Hi, is this just generally about working abroad? Because yeah, my experience for, just to explain a little bit, was last summer, so not like this last summer, but the summer before that, I did a study abroad program in Japan at Osaka University, and I was doing virtual reality research at the lab there. So what specifically did you want to like know about that?
It was simply, are there experiences abroad? If I were asking this, I would probably specifically ask, how did you find this experience and how did you enjoy it?
Right. Okay, yeah, there's a lot of different experiences abroad depending on what you're looking for. Originally, I was going to go and do some culture thing abroad in Japan, but then one of my friends actually recommended me this program from UCEAP. If you haven't heard of that, it's the UC Education Abroad program, and that spans across all of the UC schools in California. And so by going on one of those programs, you actually meet a lot of people from all of the other schools, all the other University of California schools, which is super cool. And so those programs actually have a wider range of things that they offer besides just the UC Davis programs. And a lot of those have like major programs that can give you units for your major, like computer science, for example. And so for that one, it was an engineering research program. I think the description was fairly broad on the site, but at least for that program, after you apply and get in, they match you with some professor at the university based on your interest. So some people even did biology, so it was a very like general program, but generally engineering for this one. And then once they match you, you eventually get to the university and you discuss like what you're going to be working on, and that ranges based on what interest you provided, because like I was interested in VR, so I was matched with a VR professor, but there were other types of professors there with different computer science things. And so you might just be working on a project by yourself, or you might be assisting some researcher there who already does something and just helping them with their work. And so in my example, I actually just started like a project on my own to learn about VR, and then test out different things that I'd come up with after talking with some of the other associate professors there. And so I would say the work experience and like the day-to-day differs per program, per professor that you might be researching under. But in general, it was fairly lax as long as you come up with a concrete plan and then you take steps to work towards that, and you have goals and you can show that to people in the lab. And I think that in general is just kind of how it might work. Yeah, but I would definitely recommend studying abroad if you have the opportunity.
If it's ever safe to do it again. But yes, thank you so much, Bud. I have another question that was DM'd to me, and then we'll go into the ones that everyone can see. But this one I'm going to target specifically to Alicia and Shivani, because you two mentioned that you worked in pretty fast-paced environments before. And someone asked what some of the benefits and drawbacks you found with such a fast-paced environment, with the quick meetings, fast feedback from members, making changes on the fly.
I can go first. So I would say probably the biggest drawback is sometimes you might feel a little lost or overwhelmed. It might just seem like such a big task you have to do, and you can be very confused. And so there's definitely been times when I was asked to do something and I had absolutely no idea how to do it. But what I will say is you need to learn how to reach out to people and message and find help. Find your internal version of Stack Overflow and learn how to search well, because there's a lot of resources out there. And even just like talking to people on your team. Ask for guidance from a mentor to break a project down into steps that are more easily searchable so that you can dive deep on your own. And I think they want you to succeed. So they're there to support you. And I think there's also a learning curve in every job. So being able to accept that you're not going to know everything off the bat. And that's a good thing to be able to do. I tend to have a personality where I'm more of a workaholic, so I kind of like that kind of environment. I like to always be challenged. So it kind of fits with what I'm looking for, but not everyone is like that. So also just knowing what kind of environments you will thrive in is good. And you might be surprised. You might be able to just take it in, and I don't think it's as bad as it gets painted out to be. I will say I also know a lot of friends who love to look at Reddit. There's a lot of horror stories on Reddit. So what I will say is like a lot of online forums are very biased towards like the bad side. And I know a lot of people who have also had like really good experiences. So don't get too terrified. Yeah.
That's a really good point. Alicia, you're next.
Okay, yeah, I wanted Shiv to go first because I felt she'd probably give a better answer. So from my side, I think fast-paced has to do more with the expectations than anything. So if it's fast-paced, but the expectations are realistic, you'll be fine. I don't think you'd be under any more stress than, a slower pace with higher expectations. So I think generally you'd be okay. The issue is when you have a fast pace with high expectations, higher than realistic, then that can cause some issues, but you're not going to know that until you start, and it's very team specific. So from my experience, fast paced basically means you don't have an excuse to not be working at any time. If you're stuck, it's probably on your side that you're stuck, not because of someone else. And as Shiv said, you just need to reach out for help as often as possible. I think generally people give the guidance that you should reach out for help if you're stuck for longer than half an hour to an hour. I usually go to a day or 2 days because I'm not comfortable reaching out that soon. But that is the general advice, and they repeat it multiple times, regardless of what company you're at. They just tell you, just ask for help when you're stuck. So that's one thing at a fast pace to get used to. And that's actually probably a good thing because that's a pattern you should be developing for yourself. Generally, it's not really specific to coding. You should know when to ask for help and when you can do something yourself. I think Shiv touched on every other point that I would have mentioned.
Awesome. No, yeah, those two are very, very, very solid answers. I'm learning as I'm doing this panel as well. So I hope everyone else is also learning through this. Okay, we have another awesome question that I think a lot of people have been wondering. How long does the internship application process usually take? Alicia's like, oh, it's been so long. I haven't had to worry about that.
No, it's just mine were just weird.
Go for it. Like talk about it.
The first one I'd say is probably the most normal, which was a sophomore year Microsoft Explore internship. If you don't know what that is and you're a sophomore, I would look it up. It's basic, or a freshman. It's a freshman sophomore internship at Microsoft. So for that one, that was probably my most usual interview process, even though I attended a conference and that's how I got the interview. But my overall application period was probably from September to February. So it was pretty long. The next year's was 3 weeks. And then the last one was also 3 weeks. So the last two have been kind of abnormal, but generally you should apply right when the application comes out is what I've learned. The earlier you apply, the fewer other applicants there are in the way of them reaching yours. So you should apply right when it comes out. Don't care if your resume is perfect. It's not going to be regardless of when you apply. As Evelyn said, like get it as close to ready as you can, and then just start applying as soon as the applications open, which is usually mid-August. This year got pushed, but generally you should aim for mid-August, regardless of the position. And then from there, you'll probably have a shorter application cycle than other people who apply later.
Nice. And Mila, yeah, I was just about to call on you because I'm curious about what the PM difference is.
Yeah, so I don't like when people give this answer, but it's definitely dependent on company. At least that's what I found out. For Microsoft, it took me probably like a month and a half, I want to say at least. Whereas like other companies wrapped it up in 3 weeks, like just kept moving me over and then like it's done. So I think it's definitely dependent on the company. I was gonna say something. Oh yeah. So when it comes to applying, I would for sure say, I guess this is like a cheat code, but try not to apply on third-party sites or even through LinkedIn, I think, because I've been told companies have to pay some money or some sort of expense to get applicants that they get from third-party sites. So I would for sure say like they look at that afterwards. So any chance you get, definitely apply directly on the application site or like their company site. Like if it's Google, go to Google Careers or whatever, find the internships and apply directly there because that gets sent to their internal system rather than them having to go out. So that would be one thing that came up to mind. But yeah, I mean, in terms of overall process, at least for PMs, it varies from 3 to 5 rounds. So everything from like, I guess let's start with like a phone screening, and then rounds 2 through 4 are all different, depends. Sometimes they'll split up, like only one round will be product, and then like another one will be like a super day, or sometimes they'll just do one every time. So that, I guess I would say, definitely look into the company if you get into the pipeline. And then kind of like definitely figure that out before you go into the pipeline, because you don't want to move on from one step and then say like, hey, we have 3 more rounds for you. So definitely just be wary of that.
I did not know that. I think half of my applications are now void because of what you just said. So yay, thank you for that. Okay, I want to open it up to Shivani and Evelyn if you have anything else to add to this question, so feel free.
Yeah, so I just wanted to mention that mine took about like 3 weeks or 4 weeks-ish on average. But also, if you have like another offer on the table, you can expedite your other interviews. So you can possibly expedite your other application process if you have another offer on the table. And they usually would expedite.
Yeah, and I'll just add a quick bit. So when I applied after sophomore year, or for my internship after sophomore year, since it was a first, second year program, I think it also took a little longer, like Alicia was saying. I think I applied in November and I didn't get my offer till March. So it was a long process. I actually thought they forgot about me. So I guess if you're going for a first or second year program, don't be too concerned if it waits. They might be going through like full time and like the third year interviews first. Or at least that's what I deduced. And the one thing I like about Amazon is since like I've been interning, the way it works is on your last day, you'll have a meeting with your manager. And if they like you and want you essentially rehired, they'll let you know on your last day if you'll be getting a return offer. And so there's no reapplication. You'll know after, pretty much based on your performance. So yeah.
Thank you.
I had actually 2 more. Sorry, I had 2 more.
Oh, dang.
Yeah.
Okay, go for it, Alicia.
Okay. Evelyn reminded me of one. And I remember the reason why mine took like 3 weeks was because of expediting the offers, because of competing offers. But there's a flip side to that, which is you can also get offers extended, probably up to 2 weeks usually. And that tends to be enough time to then tell the other company that, you know, you have a deadline as well. So I've used that to extend/expedite offers. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is, I wanted to mention what the full-time interview process for SWE is also like, because I don't think anyone mentioned that. So for Google, the full-time process was usually 2 phone screens that I think I skipped, but you would usually do 2 phone screens, and then you would go on site and do 4 technical interviews back-to-back and 1 behavioral. And I think that's fairly similar for most full-time as well. If you're not coming from an internship, if you are, you might have to do a few technicals, but they tend to be much fewer than if you were coming just through the regular application pool.
Awesome. And Mila, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I guess Alicia started talking about offers, so something came to mind. Definitely try to get your offer extended, but if, let's say, you accept, definitely don't renege it. Or I guess I wouldn't say like don't. I mean, if you want, you can, but I've been told you get put on a blacklist of some sort for that company. So I don't know.
I think that's somewhat rumors. I've also heard.
I'm not exactly sure, but
just to be safe, maybe don't. Yeah.
Yes, I would just say, I mean, just make sure you're on good standing with the company, I guess. Let's keep it vague there. But yeah, I guess just be cautious when it comes to that.
Yeah, and we're touching into the next question about, negotiations. If any of you who, have had experience with negotiations would like to talk about it a bit, or if you, haven't, but have heard certain things that are common practice or standard, go for it. Free reign.
So I haven't negotiated, but I did have a competing full-time from Microsoft when I got the Google offer. So they matched that. I have recommended to people to try to get an offer from, I'm not saying Microsoft's an easy company, that was just because I interned there, but try to get an offer from a company you would find you can get an offer from. There are some that are somewhat easier to get offers through, or at least even just companies you don't put on your top list, for instance. You can use those as matching for the ones that you care about. So I would just, it's obviously always good to have multiple offers. I understand that that's not really the case this year, especially, and that it's hard enough to get one. I completely understand. But when possible, if you do have multiple offers, just make sure that they match the others that you have. And then in terms of negotiating, I did not negotiate past that, but I do know people who did. And I'll just say for full-time at Google, for instance, they don't really renegotiate your offer. So some people do end up getting higher, but just know that you might end up with what you originally had. There's no harm in trying, but I would only really put one offer together to renegotiate, send it to them, and they'll either accept or reject that. And then you probably don't have a second go. So make sure that that one offer is the one you want.
Good feedback. I'm going to be right back. I'm going to let Ben take a turn at asking questions. He's going to make them extra spicy too.
I mean, we could just continue with the negotiating for right now if anyone has any additional thoughts on that or things that they have heard about how to negotiate and what's possible and what's not.
I know Amazon doesn't negotiate. I still tried, but they didn't change my offer. So I would say most of theirs are like, they have a whole department that goes through and tries to come up with a fair package. And so you might have a harder time negotiating, especially if you don't have a competing offer.
Yeah, at least as far as it goes for interns, I haven't heard of many people negotiating their intern offers. Or, I mean, I guess I won't say that, but at least for a lot of people, I don't think it's too crazy. So yeah, I think I don't have much to say in terms of negotiation. This year was kind of weird because companies had like budget cuts or whatever. So there probably wasn't as much flexibility with, I guess, this class of interns and full-time people, but yeah.
If you are thinking about, sorry, Evelyn, just go.
Yeah.
Okay, if you are thinking about what you should negotiate to, you can look at Glassdoor, and they should have salary breakdowns for each position. So you can kind of see where you are relative to that salary breakdown.
Yeah, there's like a lot of really nice breakdowns online, like Glassdoor, as Alicia mentioned. I also sometimes refer to levels.fyi, which is also another nice website that showcases it's like a self-reported salary apparently. But I personally did not negotiate my offer mainly because it was in the pandemic when I got the return offer. But I would probably recommend trying at least to negotiate if you want, mainly because you never know what's going to come out of it. And I'm also pretty sure Reddit has a no negotiation policy, but I could be wrong. Yeah.
Awesome, thanks for those. And I can actually add a little bit here because I interned at Microsoft over the summer, and I saw a lot of people talking about different negotiations, especially for like return offers and how do I, get more money off of that. And I would say that some of the things that you can negotiate are company dependent, like some might be locked in, such as salary, because salary might be tied to a specific level that you're coming in as a software engineer. So that might not budge, but then other things like your signing bonus or stock, those might be negotiable, but that just all depends on your, the company that you're applying to. And generally the offer that they give you does have a little leeway, especially if you have competing offers. From what I've heard, like you almost basically need competing offers in order to negotiate because you showed them how good you were in interviews. So now what are you going to say? Like, oh, I want more money because I'm really good, right? So I think competing offers are really important for negotiating as well.
Money nice. Money can help us in many ways. But awesome insight. Thank you so much for covering for me, Ben. I want to move on to another question that someone asked. How many leak code questions did y'all solve? You know, did y'all do two sum? Did y'all do the raindrop one? The infamous raindrop trapping rainwater one? Yeah, that one. What did you do to prepare? Did you do leak code?
Okay. Okay. Yes, I did leak code for every interview. My process is usually to do around a weekish of actual leak code problems. So I would do about 5 a day maybe, and these would be like I would fully solve them, and they were mainly easy medium problems, probably medium for the later interviews. And then after that, this was kind of just to get the syntax down and make sure that I knew the language that I was going to be coding in well enough to do it during the interviews. After that, I would kind of just go through algorithms. So I would cheat on LeetCode, meaning I would go and look at the solutions after I read the problems. And this went a lot faster. So I could do like 10 to 15 a day. And I would just be looking for the tricks that they use, if there were any, or any patterns. So from then on, it was more like, could I identify the pattern that the problem was using, rather than actually code it, because I knew the language now. I just needed to know the algorithm. So that's what I would focus on then. And for the Google ones, for instance, I bought LeetCode Premium. I don't regret it. You can unlock a list of the top 100 questions of a company with LeetCode Premium. And I did about half or more of those questions to prepare. And I only had a week to prepare for my Google onsite. So in that week, I did like half of those questions. And by did, I mean, I actually did like maybe a 10th of them. And then I looked at the algorithms for the rest. And that was super helpful for me. So I would definitely recommend looking at the LeetCode list. And I would also recommend looking at their discussions. If you're doing coding challenges, they tend to have a lot of the more recent questions in the LeetCode Discuss tab as well.
Yeah, definitely want to talk about the LeetCode Discuss. I think at some point, like people actually like posted the online assessment questions on there. So I definitely would use that as a resource. Also, LeetCode Premium, I personally use LeetCode. I don't remember the exact number of questions that I solved. I was pretty bad at doing them. But I think LeetCode Premium is great because you can see like the questions for each company. But I think you can also probably try and find them online, but they might not be as recent. Or you can try and get someone like to post them for you on the LeetCode subreddit. I think I've seen someone do that before. Yeah, and also like I also went on Glassdoor and just go over like each company that I'll be interviewing for and then look at the discussion. Sometimes they also posted the questions and I just kind of get a sense of like what the companies might ask through that.
That's a good research. A lot of awesome resources that I didn't know about. So yeah, if you're listening in and you don't know how to prepare, keep notes. These are really good resources. Anyone else? LeetCode? Ooh, how about this? Shivani, do you have a preference between HackerRank and LeetCode?
I've used LeetCode. I haven't used HackerRank before. I also did a lot of like just reviewing concepts though, and just like going through data structures and understanding like when I should use one versus another, as well as just like know your language that you pick, like know what different data structures they already have built in and what those runtimes are, because they can sometimes ask you to be like, what is the runtime of what you just wrote? So it's good to know if like something like a dictionary is O of 1 or O of N or something.
Oh, that reminded me actually. I said that I do lead code problems. I didn't specify like how I choose those. So I tend to do 2 to 3 of each of the topics that I said earlier. And I made sure that I was kind of distributing correctly. And I did extra for greedy and DP because for me, at least, those were the hardest. So I did many extras of those. And then after that, I went into the algorithms.
Speaking of, Shivani, you mentioned, knowing the language. Someone actually asked me what languages would, you recommend? And I know that this differs, what you're comfortable with, but do you have a preferred language that you would recommend to anyone? All of you, this is open to anyone who's done technicals before.
So the last time I interviewed was sophomore year, like mid sophomore year. So at that point, I really was only coding in C++. So I did do my interviews in C++ just because it was really fresh in my mind. I would not say that's the best language though to do interviews in because you do have a lot more to handle than if you were to use Java or Python, which might actually have much better libraries available. So if I did interviews now, I might have considered those, but at the time that was the language I knew best. And so I wanted to spend more time just going through the concepts. And sometimes if it is like a very like technical, if the technical interviews with someone, like an interview, you can write pseudocode and they'll be like, that's fine. If it's like one of those interviews where you're like coding something and running it at the end against test cases, you need to write code that compiles and runs well. So then make sure that language you know to like the T. But if it's with an interviewer, you might just say like, I would just put everything in lowercase and then just comment that and they'd be okay. Like they know you can look that up.
I think language is one that people really differ on. I know like a lot of Davis students tend to use C++ because that's what we learn in class. I just think use whatever language you're most comfortable with. C++ is not my favorite language because you have to worry about memory and the space yourself and know where to deallocate, where to allocate. And you can run into a lot of issues with those. So my preferred language is Java. If you take an AP computer science, you probably use Java. A lot of the data structures that you might have to define yourself in C++ are already defined in Java, and they, to me at least, have a better container list. Python is one that people do use, but I do think it's usually frowned upon by a lot of interviewers just because it's the simplest language and it does abstract a lot of things. So it can hide a lot of the inner details. That being said, it's perfectly acceptable to use it. I'm just saying, I think a lot of interviewers are more familiar with Java or C++, so they might be able to help you more if you use those languages. Other than that, I think I had another thing. Oh yeah, in terms of pseudocode, I've actually never had an interview where I could use pseudocode. It might be a thing for sure, but my interviewers have always said you have to write it out. If you need to turn something to lowercase, just write to lowercase with parentheses after. And I think they prefer that to pseudocode if possible.
I think that's kind of what I meant. It's not like pseudo, but like you don't have to write compiling code.
Exactly. Yeah. I hate interviews with compilers, but they happen. And you just kind of have to guess at the function. And the great thing about compilers is they usually tell you what the function is if you're close enough. So.
Awesome. That's really good feedback. I know a lot of people have been, asking that question. So awesome. I want to dive into a question that someone asked, but I want to throw my spice in again. But Dominic asked, how well do Davis classes prepare you in terms of data structures and algorithms? I want to add on top of that, were there any specific classes that you felt were very good at preparing you for interviews for jobs?
So for me, I think it also depends on the professor who's teaching it because the way they teach it is different. Um, I I think I don't know what the name of the classes are now because they changed, but but I took the data structures and algorithms course and I thought they were a good introduction to these data structures, but I don't think they necessarily prepared me for the interviews. But again, I took it with it might be different with another professor. So I feel like I definitely still had to grind leak code to know how to apply these data structures because when I took them, all I needed to do was to implement these data structures, like how to like implement them from scratch, not necessarily how to apply them. And so I think that I had like it didn't really prepare me that well for interviews, but they were a good intro. So
I want to call on MELAP because this isn't specific to technical. It could be any class that really prepared you for, your PM. Oh, and you're also president of Annual Work. So, anything that's helped you become who you are today from Davis.
Yeah, I think from a product perspective, unfortunately, there's no PM course or like there's no PM class, which hopefully we can get in the works. But I would firstly recommend people come from like a bunch of different majors when it comes to PM. So it's very like projects heavy and like just experience heavy. But I would say definitely take the MGT series or like the tech management minor. That I probably learned more from that minor than I'm learning in econ right now. So I would for sure recommend that series. And then outside of that, I think it's a lot of just like due diligence and getting exposed to like PM jargon and a lot of stuff like that. So that just comes down to doing projects and stuff like that. To really help you, I guess, understand actually like, what does it mean to be a PM outside of just like its paper answer. But yeah, I mean, hopefully we can get a product management course at Davis in the coming quarters. I'll be working on that. That's my goal, but we'll see if it ends up happening. But yeah, I mean, yeah, that's it. Definitely take the MGT series if you take any away from that answer.
Absolutely. Anyone else have specific classes, even if it wasn't something that really prepared you, a class that you felt like is necessary if you're going to be a UC Davis student and you want to succeed after you graduate? Was there a specific class that really helped you get to where you are today?
I have a few. So I think most of the courses at Davis were really good, as Evelyn said, introductions. None of them are going to even half prepare you for your interviews, to be honest. It's all about application. Those classes are not about application. Unfortunately, they're more about conceptual. So in order to do the application, you need something like leak code or some coding practice. You cannot just read a textbook. In terms of actually working, I think classes that have been super helpful for me now are 150, which is operating systems, 165A, which is databases. So that was building a database from scratch. And it was actually more about concurrency, in my opinion, than operating systems was. And I'm working in the networking stack right now. So it's all about threads and concurrency. So that's been super useful. I think 60 is also a great class. It introduces you to so many different data structures at the same time. I think those are the ones that come up in my head. Yeah.
I can add just a little bit, but mostly everyone's covered it. I took databases with Professor Pourquet, and I think he did a great job at like covering everything and also going into some of the like common uses for some of the database data structures too. So if he is teaching it, I'd sign up. 150 was a really interesting course. I like that one. I decided to take networks after my first internship when I realized how important they were and how little I knew about them. It's kind of a drier course and there's a lot of like very nitty gritty in it. But even if you take away like half of it, I think you'll have a better understanding of some of the stuff, especially since everything tends to be going onto the network now.
I kind of forgot to say the networking course. Oops. Yeah, I'm working in networking. Definitely did not learn most of that course because, yes, as Shivani said, it's a lot of material and I could not absorb it all. But what I learned, like the networking stack itself, was very helpful and allows me to understand at least half of the conversations that are going on.
I have so many classes. I still. Oh, sorry. Go for it.
Just real quick. As a PM, although you don't need to code, you kind of need to have an understanding of how tech works to an extent. So hence I guess I took on a CS minor for those. I guess I don't know where you guys are, what year you guys are in, but definitely recommend data structures. Although you won't be coding, it's just good to know. And then classes like I guess database systems, I'm taking that next quarter, but I guess like that wasn't, I guess like that's something, really anything like web programming, I think that's like EX 152 or something. It's always good to kind of know how the web works. Cloud is also trending nowadays. So I guess anything you can learn about cloud, that's also a good decision. But yeah, this is all from the, let's just say you want to get a holistic view on tech. Those classes will probably help you as well.
I was just gonna say there are so many classes that I have to take still, but I only have so many quarters left, so it's okay. We can always come back. We can come back to UC Davis and take more classes. But I wanted to give this question some spotlight. We do have 15 minutes, so maybe I'll call on like 2 people instead of all 4 of you. But feel free if you do really want to answer this, interrupt me, answer the question. But someone asked if there are job options where you don't code all day. Are there? Do they exist? If they're in tech, I'm sure there are some. Milap, do you want to touch on this?
Yeah, I'll shake it. So I guess you could low-key take PM for this role. Again, it depends on the company. Like for example, if you're a PM for Google, I think you're naturally going to find yourself coding at one point. Not necessarily coding, but you'll definitely be more engineering-related conversations. Whereas, like, let's say you're a PM at a company like Atlassian or something, those are very product-centric. So you'll always have an engineering counterpart with you. So in that situation, you won't have to take on the engineering side. But outside of that, roles-wise, definitely I think marketing-related, product design is really trending. I would suggest if you have a design sense, definitely go to product design, marketing. On the analyst side as well, I don't know, I guess, again, that's dependent on how heavy you are. If it's like data science versus analyst, it's definitely different. But those are some that come on the top of my mind, as well as program manager and project manager. Product manager, program manager, and project manager all sound similar, but they all do a little bit of different stuff. So I would explore the trifecta there and then see kind of where you see yourself. And then I think that gives you a decent list.
At Google, we have technical program managers and then product managers. So product managers do not work, as Milip said, with the engineering teams, but the technical program managers do. They, however, do not code. So you might be involved in technical discussion and you'll be expected to know technical concepts, but you won't be coding. If you want a balance of coding and not coding, you'll probably start as a new grad engineer and then work your way up, and you'll start having meetings. And at that point, you won't be able to code as much. So that's what I've seen is as people get higher up, they don't code as much. My manager has been struggling to find time to code. So he's at the point where he is looking to code, but has no time to do so. I honestly think that's probably, at least in big companies, that's the way that you would have less coding to do. At a startup, though, you probably naturally will have to take on more responsibility than just technical. So if you're looking, or even just a smaller company, so if you're looking for a more of a balance between coding and something else, I would look more at companies with less defined technical roles. And those will probably have more opportunity for you to kind of split your time between multiple things.
Awesome. I think I'm amongst the group of people who want to go into tech, but would like to minimize the coding, you know, as much as I enjoy the satisfaction of all my code working. It can be painful sometimes, and that's okay. We've all been there, but awesome. I also want to touch on another question. how much focus did you guys put on side projects? Did you do any side projects? And maybe I could, lump extracurriculars on there as well. How much focus and time and energy did you put on those while you were a student? Also, if you feel like it helped you in any way, sorry.
Sorry.
Oh, you can go, Evelyn.
Oh, okay. I'll just be quick. But I was gonna say that I actually didn't really have any side projects. I started my first internship. I highlighted my class projects, and then after that, after my first internship, I basically talked about my experience at that internship when I was doing interviews for looking for the next internships. And also I was in HackDavis, so I was busy with that. So I didn't have time for any side projects, also with school and recruiting and everything. So personally for me, I did not really do much side project, although I did attend HackDavis as a participant my first or second year. That's when I actually built something. But other than that, I personally didn't do any or create anything outside of that. So.
Yeah. So for me, the summer after my freshman year, I wasn't able to get an internship. So I decided to spend that summer learning some basic web dev and creating a personal website. So that's one side project I've worked on. Other than that, I've participated in HackDavis twice. And each time we were able to create a project, which was really fun and also a good way to put on your resume and have a side project to talk about in a weekend. So it was very fast, but you got it on the resume and you had a good time. And also I spent a lot of time in leadership for the Davis Computer Science Club. And it was a great way for me to network, also make friends, and to gain some leadership skills and some soft skills that I feel have really transferred into some of my internships as well as other parts of my life too. Mm-hmm.
I love that. I feel like I couldn't do just programming throughout my career here at UC Davis. So I props to all of you for being able to slide in, extracurriculars, side projects on top of all the other stuff you've been doing. Anyone have anything else to add? Because I have a question for Mila.
I guess I'll add one thing. I guess the spot in your resume that's usually catered towards projects, technical projects for SUIs will likely be catered towards leadership or some sort of that other aspect. So I think you can divide product management into a bunch of things, like I was talking marketing, design, whatever it may be. But I would suggest definitely tap into a couple of those and create a project around them. Just to show that you're able to showcase you're not only just a leader, I guess, to an extent, but you can do more. You have some niche skill. So for me, it was a lot of this past summer, I went really in depth in product design. So now I'm decent. And the next year, I guess this coming year, I plan to go in specific for technical side. So I guess I would definitely say, although there's not one ideal background, definitely pick and choose a couple of these areas where you can really get better at. And that'll help you make more of, I guess, it'll help you become a more whole candidate rather than, I guess, just somebody okay at just leading,
I can also go off of that. I also didn't have a freshman internship. So I had started doing research with a CS professor in fall of freshman year. And so I continued that into summer instead. And that was my side project for that year. And then in terms of extracurriculars, I kind of focused on one thing. I did a computer science club board for 1 year. And then I chose to stay with HackDavis instead. So I did HackDavis for 3 years. And I think leadership really rounds you out. And extracurriculars, I think Angie asked the question about what it does for you. So good for your behavioral. You can't be talking about high school activities in your behavioral interviews, or you shouldn't. You can talk about them a little bit, but you should really focus on what you did in college. And that's what your extracurriculars are really good for.
I also want to clarify. Sorry, earlier I said we only had 15 minutes left when we're actually going until 9:30 p.m. It's like bedtime. But if you have any more questions, please keep them coming. We will ask them to the panelists. But otherwise, if we do end up wrapping up all of our questions, I do have a couple more of my own, but we might wrap up early to allow our panelists to have an earlier bedtime. Me, I'm not a panelist, but I could use an earlier bedtime. With that being said, Milap, I did have a question submitted for you specifically. Someone said that they thought a lot of companies prefer program managers to have either a CS or info technology or business related degree. Do you have any input on that?
Yes, I would say it's definitely like, how do I phrase this? I guess I'll just have a little history, I guess. Product management never really existed. It basically came about where there were just a bunch of engineering folks at like Facebook and stuff, but they realized there was somebody, like there needed to be somebody fulfilling this, I guess, engineering lead, but wasn't necessarily engineering lead, basically doing what a PM currently does. So like it's been stereotyped, I guess, that you need to come from a technical background. But I would say if you have one, it definitely plays to your favor because obviously like you have a stronger technical background or understanding than I guess folks that don't. What I think a lot of companies look for is you need to successfully be able to interact with engineers. And if you look at two candidates, one with engineering background, one without, then you naturally pick the one with engineering because let's say he or she can probably talk better or work better with engineers. So I would say if you are not coming from a CS background like myself, or I think a lot of PM is like pretty hot, I think from the past 2 years. So I would say it's definitely opening up opening up opportunities for a lot more people. But I would say definitely don't expect, I guess, to like just try to apply new grad PM role without anything like technical. I would say there is a caveat there. Let's say you're a bio major. You could play that domain expertise to your advantage and then specifically apply to tech companies in healthcare. And that I know a couple people there where like they specifically had a bio background, but like they applied directly towards healthcare companies, or there's this company called Aura or something. It's like a ring for the NBA, but they do something for healthcare. So they were able to leverage that domain expertise and then like use it there. So definitely a bunch of ways to get into it. I would say to answer the question again, it's definitely a nice to have if you have an engineering background, but there are definitely ways around it by doing side projects, by like coding other stuff, because code your portfolio and you'll learn a lot and things like that. And then again, if you, let's say you're like a fashion design major or like some external major like that, and you really want to become a PM, I guess one is an MBA will help go a long way. But outside of that, use that domain expertise, maybe try to break into tech companies in fashion or like in design. And hopefully that will help as well. So hopefully that gives you a couple options depending on whoever asks this question and your background or whoever else is interested.
Thank you. And I now have a question targeted at anyone who has just come out of like remote work, or if you're currently working remotely right now. Travis asked, how did you keep yourself engaged in a virtual working environment? I mean, most of us are still experiencing this as students too, but as someone in the working world, how have you navigated that?
Okay. Yeah, so I've been going 4 months and I haven't seen under someone's neck. So it's been great. Yeah, I think the best way is, I didn't do this, but I wish I had, is a lot of people do one-on-ones with like every person on the team. So one difference between like an internship and full-time is internship is very much in a bubble. You tend to not interact with anyone outside of who you need to interact for that specific project. And you usually, at least I didn't ever pay attention in team meetings. I had no idea what anyone else was working on because I didn't care. You know, I'm just working on my own thing. It's fine. You can't do that for full time. Like you need to know who to ask for the specific thing you're working on. And you tend to be working on multiple different things, which means you're going to be interacting naturally with most of the team. So that makes it even harder for virtual work, I'd say. You don't have those weekly one-on-ones with your mentor and things like that. They did give us mentors, which was great. And my mentor is the one I talked to the most. But what we do is most people are very readily available. Like I can just message someone and ask if they're up for a chat, and they usually say yes. So then there are a lot of spontaneous ones. We host a lot of stand-ups. I go to 4 stand-ups a week, which is quite a lot. So I give an update every single day, and not a fan of that, but it does allow me to know what other people are working on and them to keep up with my progress. And I've just learned you kind of have to be very proactive with setting up meetings, especially full-time. They're not going to come to you. You're not an intern. You know, you're working there full-time now. So you have to be able to reach out to other people and set up meetings because they're not going to remember that you just started. And they won't give you, they'll give you some special treatment initially, but it goes away pretty fast, faster than for an intern. But I think the best way to just stay connected is to have those proactive meetings that you set up, do more one-on-ones with people, and just make sure that everyone knows what you're working on and that you keep track of what they're working on.
Awesome. One thing I've been doing, I've been asking people how tall they are, because you don't know. Everyone's sitting down. You'd be surprised how tall people are. You know, people you just met through you know, your cameras, your webcams. Ask people how tall they are.
How about
Okay,
just
there's
ask
a
them
reason
to
why I'm
stand
not a
up?
camera.
Ask them to stand up. Oh my God, my
Good,
manager
it's
modeled
nice.
one time. Like he was wearing a sweater and everyone wanted to see what was on it. So he started walking across the room. Still don't know how tall he is, but
That's what you ask. You got some transparency in the house. Milap, what's up? You're unmuted.
I am. So I guess, again, this is coming from a PM perspective. So I think there are a couple of things. One is just as students even, I try to set a hard cutoff. A hard cutoff was not fulfilled today. Made an exception for HackDavis. No, I'm just kidding. But usually I don't do anything after 7 p.m. No matter like what happens. And I wake up at a decent time. So like I always get like 8 hours. But point being is like it takes a little bit for sure, but I for sure so like be a little strict about yourself to make sure you're just not glued to your computer for 18 hours a day. Because it's definitely hard with the remote atmosphere. It's very easy to just, hey, like I'll go work for another hour. That extra hour could be another half a day. So that would be one, just have a little discipline based on whatever works best for you, which brings me to my second point. Try to personalize your workspace as best as you can. I know, I guess it's like a little cliche to say that, but things like just leave your room every once in an hour and fill up your water bottle or go for a walk. Those are game changers. I started taking like 2 walks for 15 minutes, and the time that I would have been spending like maybe on my phone for 15 minutes feels like an hour if I just go for a walk. So it's definitely unreal. So definitely try that. And lastly, I would say, I think coming down to this icebreaker thing, I always try to start my meetings with asking everyone like random icebreakers. And it doesn't have to be anything serious, like just fun stuff. Like I think one I asked recently was, if you were a potato, what form would you like to be prepared in, or like fried or whatever. But it's like a fun way to, you know, like bring the team together and also like bring back that realness, I guess you could say, of actual meetings. So I would for sure recommend those tips in terms of trying to stay sane remotely as well, but also just be productive.
Hey, Milap, while I have you, you're very popular tonight. I'm getting a lot of private messages. I have another question for you. Is it possible to get a PM job right out of college? It was someone's understanding that a lot of the time they want individuals with several years in the industry, and is just a CS degree enough?
Yeah, so I'll add this for sure. I would say I definitely, there are rare cases where you will get them. So I don't want to speak on behalf of everyone, but I'll say definitely like at least at large companies and even startups, to be honest, they decently look at least like one sort of PM background or some sort of PM background paired with, let's say, like an engineering role and things like that. What I do know a lot of people do in terms of applying new grad, a lot of people leverage a SWE. So I know a lot of folks that didn't necessarily get PM new grad, but let's say they spent like 5 to 6 years in engineering roles. And then once they got senior, I think what Alicia and everyone was talking about, once they didn't want to code anymore, they made a little pivot into like a more senior role where you ended up being probably more on the product side where you don't have to code, but you're still leading. So coming back to your question, I think it's, I mean, of course, it's like anything is possible, I guess you could say, but it definitely is very hard if you don't have any product experience prior, as well as just, I guess, like any domain experience. I would say it's definitely difficult, as well as PM becoming hot in the last 2 years doesn't help your case. Like nowadays, really, the only new, there's 3 types of new grad roles. There's APM roles, which are insanely hard to get. Those are like cohorts of 3 to 10, and like 6,000, 7,000 people apply. Then there's like the Microsoft, PlayStation, and I think a couple other companies offer new grad roles. And then there's like startups where you can apply. So it's really up to you. And then obviously the alternative is, let's say you're a computer science major, you can definitely just become a SWE at one of these companies and pivot. That's what I've also seen a lot of people do. Even with like analysts, even with econ backgrounds, they go ahead and become an analyst at like Amazon or Google or wherever, and then they'll just pivot because it's a lot easier to pivot once you're in the company rather than trying to like get into a new role, complete new role, a new company. So hopefully that helps answer that question.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you have a very supportive friend in the chat with us tonight. Samir is asking, well, he seems to really want to highlight Product Buds, a community that I believe you are part of on LinkedIn. And if there was an inspiration behind creating this community, and if people are interested in creating and growing that community on LinkedIn. Yeah, if you have any input on that.
I'll talk about like very quickly. This is, I don't know how many product folks we have on here, but I would say I founded a community earlier this year, not knowing the intention that it would be a very large community. But if you are interested in product, you can join 3,000 plus folks on Slack with us. It's called Product Buds. If you're interested at all breaking into product, everything is free, so don't worry at all. But yeah, I mean, I guess I'll just wrap it up there. It's just an online community. We discovered that product wasn't very, you could say like, I guess breakable, or like it wasn't very open, to be honest. There are a lot of hidden secrets in the industry and all that for a lot of students. So well, me and a couple other founders thought, well, we should kind of like bridge this gap. So that's kind of essentially what the community is. So I would highly recommend though, if anyone is interested in product, definitely join that community. A lot of folks get roles after that just because having a community to kind of go behind will always go a long way. And I would say the same for SWE or really anything. If you're going into engineering, have a group of people that are like a supportive group of people to help you through, because recruiting is tough for sure. But having the extra people will help you take that extra step.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I do have one more question I want to ask before I wrap up, unless anyone else has any pressing questions left over. But the one question I really want to ask all of you before we close is, how have your experiences in tech differed from your experiences as a student at UC Davis? Did your education prepare you adequately for the work that you're doing or have done? And do you feel like there's more learning to do? No pressure. Last question.
I can go. I feel like my experiences in internships have been very applied versions of what I've learned in school. And so the fundamentals are there. And in that sense, it really has prepared, but there's a lot of learning to do outside as well. I would say my time at an internship much more closely resembled my times at like a hackathon, where you're just intensely looking through documentation and piecing together different technologies to create something. Because that's kind of what you're doing as a software engineer, just not as fast-paced and as messily. But yeah, I mean, the classworks have been good in preparing for the jobs that I've at least been working on in Amazon and stuff. Was there any other questions that you'd asked?
No, I think you answered them very beautifully.
Great, thanks.
Anyone else?
Okay. Okay, sorry. I keep getting distracted by nothing. Okay, the question was about if it prepared me, right? Okay. I would say yes. The classes were definitely helpful. But I recently learned the advice that if you find yourself that you've stopped learning, join another team, is what someone recently told me. Even if you're up for promotion, this person kind of skipped over 2 promotions, I think, just because she didn't feel challenged anymore. So she switched team. So definitely you are going to keep learning. If you stop learning, go somewhere else. You really should never stop learning. And I think definitely the concepts are there from school, but there's a lot of difference in industry, as Shivani mentioned, with like your projects are not anywhere like your projects in school. You can't just stop once it starts working. Like half the time, I didn't know why my thing was working. You know, it was working, it was passing the test cases, I'm done. No, you cannot do that. You will go through so many code review iterations. There are people who are experts in the languages, and they'll make sure your code is the most efficient and effective it can possibly be. And that just requires learning more about that language. You're going to have multiple things that you have to work on concurrently. So like in school, I used to kind of divide into blocks, like long 3-hour chunks of working on like a program and then working on, I don't know, GE homework, so on and so forth. But in industry, right, if your test is taking an hour to run, you need to use that hour on something else that's on your plate, because you will definitely have multiple things to work on. And I'm still learning how to juggle and multitask like that. You don't have to do that for internships. You don't have to do that for school, really, but you do have to learn to do that for industry if you're going to be as effective and efficient as you can possibly be.
I like it. It was a very abridged answer. Evelyn, you're next.
Yeah, I feel like the classes that prepared me the most for the industry were my lower division classes. So my first 2 years in CS. Obviously, like some of the more specific electives or like core classes, the core upper division classes that were helpful were, for example, operating systems and networking for me personally. But I feel like those 2 classes prepared me in the sense that they introduced like a lot of computer science concepts. They introduced programming, data structures, algorithms, and everything that you do on the job. Like, honestly, I always feel like we could probably run on just like our first 2 years of college, because I feel like everything that you learn in the industry is like they don't teach you in school. Like, they don't teach you like frameworks or like anything like that. Like, obviously you have to learn that on the job, but like Alicia said, you have to constantly learn, like there are new technologies out there, like, and they constantly evolve. So you have to always be prepared to learn new things. Yeah, like honestly, I feel like that's part of the reason why CS is such a great, or like tech in general is such a great field, because you constantly learn, it constantly evolves. So honestly, like it's great to be in this field.
I guess I'll end off with 3, like I said. So I guess firstly, I agree with Alicia's point about dropping stuff. It's very easy for you to just say, all right, I'm just gonna give this a week, I'll come back to it. At least let's say like you have a product you're launching 2 months down the road, you can't necessarily just say, all right, I'm tired, there's a blocker, I'm gonna call it a day, move on. Like it doesn't necessarily work like that. So I guess like that's definitely one thing that was an eye-opener for me. The second part is, I guess, in terms of research, I think in school, a lot of stuff gets, I wouldn't necessarily hand it to you, but you always have like some sort of guiding document of some sort helping you. A lot of times technologies are new, at least that's from a PM perspective. You're always learning new methodologies or ways to create a more efficient team. So from that perspective, research is always needed. So it's a lot of, you have to like actually spend time researching and learning new things, similar to how engineers will likely just consult with other engineers to figure out a problem. And then lastly, I guess we didn't necessarily touch on this. It's pretty slept on in the tech industry, but imposter syndrome is pretty real. So I would just say, definitely be cognizant. It's very easy to compare yourself to other people. LinkedIn doesn't do the greatest job from that perspective. So I would say, take everything that you see with a grain of salt. Definitely just know, as long as you're pushing, I guess, yourself to the right limit and like you know what you're doing, is helping you progress, I'd say like you're on a good track. So that's where I'd end up. And I guess one last thing was like, I think somebody told me, if you're comfortable, you're not growing, something along that line. I guess I'd also keep that in mind, as everyone here is like, I guess everyone I guess has broken in or is going to break into pretty early in their tech career or in their career in general. So I would for sure say, don't just settle, I guess. Maybe this is just like my inner drive, I guess, but definitely push yourself and you'll be surprised where you can take it. But yeah, that's where I'll leave it there. And then I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, fantastic answers to that final question, everyone. And, before I wrap up, I want to give huge thank yous to our panelists tonight for, giving up so many hours of their day to come talk to us about their experiences, advice they might have. It's been very insightful for, both the audience and me. I've learned a lot and I love learning. So thank you again to our panelists for spending some time with us tonight. If you have any questions and if any of them are willing to stick around and, answer some in the chat, feel free to. But thank you, the audience, for attending and for asking your awesome questions. We certainly got a chance to learn more about you and what you value and, careers in tech. Before I wrap up, I also want to give another shout out to our application. If you are interested in getting some of that experience, if you want side projects, if you want that experience that'll help you, show off to some of these recruiters at these big tech companies, please apply to HackDavis, get that opportunity. I think most of us, all of the panelists here are probably going to be there, whether as mentors, as participants, or as just people there to have a good time. So please, if you want to see us again, as you should, please apply, hackdavis.io. And if you came late or if you would like to watch this panel again, we will be posting this tomorrow, by tomorrow on hackdavis.io/workshops. So please keep an eye out on those. But other than that, I hope you have a wonderful night. Get some sleep. It is a Thursday night. What are you doing? It's so late. You should be in bed, young children. So please, Ben's looking at me like, oh, she's not our mom. But yes, thank you so much for attending. Have a wonderful rest of your night, morning, afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and we'll see you later.